I'm sure there'll be more people filtering through, but I will make a start. So welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you here to learn more about whale and dolphin conservation's work in Norway. We're joined by two very important guests who are actively involved in this mission. We have Lottie Pearson, WDC's anti-whaling campaign coordinator, and Round Fliegenring, apologies if I've said that wrong, Round, an Icelandic Norwegian author, artist, and illustrator. For those of you who may be new to WDC, let me briefly introduce you to who we are and what we stand for. Whale and Dolphin Conservation is the leading global charity dedicated to the protection and welfare of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Our mission is very simple. It's to create a world where every whale and dolphin is safe and free. So not only does that involve hunting, but also things like captivity, bycatch, safe seas in general, pollution. So we cover a broad spectrum of things to try and keep whales, dolphins, porpoises safe and free. Now, whaling, as many of you know, remains a completely brutal and incredibly outdated practice. And even in this day and age, commercial whaling is still carried out in a few countries, including Norway. The act of hunting is horrendous from my point of view, as whales, dolphins, porpoises, they have really complex social lives, much like humans, and they also play a crucial role in maintaining the health of our oceans. And whaling is something that we are determined to bring to an end, and we have been since day one. Now, at WDC, we focus on ending this practice through advocacy, education, and by engaging with communities, policymakers, influencers, you name it. But what we have learned through years of experience is that change has to come from within. There are lots of instances of other organizations standing from the outside, telling people you shouldn't be doing this, or you should be doing it how we think you should be doing it, whereas we think it should come from within. So the people that are living in those countries, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail shortly. So in this webinar, we'll be discussing our current initiatives and how Round's amazing art is helping us to inspire change. And we'll hope this will give you a bit of an insight into why we believe an end to whaling is not just possible, but we think it's really within reach now. And together we can make it happen. So thank you for joining this important conversation. We're all thrilled to have you here. So let's get started. Now, what I wanted to do is basically set the scene so everyone knows what is going on in Norway. There will be some people watching who already have an incredible knowledge of whaling in Norway, but there'll be some who are just beginners. So everyone is welcome, but let's just get everyone up to speed and at the same level. So you'll be able to see some stats on the screen right now. So Norway's whaling industry is one of the last commercial whaling operations in the world, as I mentioned, and it primarily targets minke whales, which are the smallest of the great whale species. Now, Norway conducts this whaling under an objection to the International Whaling Commission's moratorium on commercial whaling, which effectively exempts itself from the ban. And since then, Norway has continued to set its own quotas for whale catches, which often exceed the IWC's scientific recommendations. Lottie will go into more detail about what's going on, but I believe there are 414 minke whales were killed in the hunt season this year. The industry in Norway is quite small, so it involves only a few vessels, and it operates within Norwegian waters. There's a real decline in domestic demand for whale meat as well. But despite that, the government still supports the industry, and again, Lottie will tell you more, but positions itself as cultural heritage almost. But you'll learn more about the pushback against whaling domestically, and there's also lots of concerns from our point of view from animal welfare and also the environmental impact of whaling as well. We think it's incredibly cruel and outdated, and the methods that they use are horrendous in terms of exploding grenade harpoons and that sort of stuff. Now, once they have the whale meat, the actual market for whale products is incredibly limited. And globally, the demand for whale meat has been quite low. And Norway has previously exported whale meat to Japan, but restrictions and trade barriers have kind of interfered with that a little bit. So it's not as cut and dry as it used to be. However, the government maintains this quota, albeit with kind of declining catches year on year. It was nearly 100 less this year than it was last year. So we're at a point where the future of Norwegian whaling remains uncertain. There is lots of global pressure on all countries that are commercial whaling to come to an end. And groups like us, Whale and Dolphin Conservation, we are in it for the long run. We're not going to stop until whaling in Norway and other countries ends. And a big part of what we do is highlighting the ecological importance, and we want to see things like whale watching instead of whaling. The old adage, you can kill a whale once, but you can take its photo 1,000 times. It's something that we strongly believe in. But to bring in the expert, Lottie. So Lottie, just give us a little bit of background as to where your kind of passion for whales began and how, like, your journey.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I could start with where I grew up. So I was lucky enough to grow up in both the UK and Norway. So I lived in Norway for most of my childhood. And when you grow up in Norway, you tend to be quite connected to nature. And I guess my family were super good at sort of getting out and about. And we were also really lucky that my grandparents lived up in the north of Norway, and we got to go out on a boat every now and then. And I remember just being always looking out for whales and dolphins when we were up there. And so I think it started there, really. And then at university, I went back to the UK and studied ecology and environmental sciences. And then I went and did a master's in marine and coastal sustainability. And I think it was only in the last few years at university where I kind of learnt about whaling in my own home country, and it just really broke my heart. And I didn't understand. I think a lot of people in Norway, I realized then that a lot of people don't know what's going on. So the fact that I am able to work on this area is really close to my heart and inspiring. So yeah, I think that's where it all started.
And now that you're with WDC and leading our work in Norway, can you tell us a bit about the reason that we're here for this webinar? Tell us more about the Wave of Change campaign.
Yes, so like you mentioned, I guess it's all rooted in collaboration in country. So this campaign's overall aims are kind of to support and nurture those grassroots activists who already exist in the country, and the opposition sentiment that already is there. So what we've really been trying to do for this past year is sort of tap into those people who are on the ground and build that network to bring everyone together onto the same page. So I guess, yeah, what that means is a lot of collaboration. So activists, young and old activists, anyone, any company, any organization. So we mentioned animal welfare organizations and environmental organizations. Anyone who agrees with the message that we're putting out, sort of that whales are super important for the environment and they are being killed in the most brutal way. Our goal is to find these people and really empower them in Norway to speak up and and then create, you know, a Norway for Wales in country. So yeah, so I guess from that we've been sort of able to talk to politicians and lawyers, yeah, activists from all backgrounds, and yeah, really supporting these people in country who want to grow the awareness of how important they are. And it also, like you mentioned, it also means giving solutions. So we want to also promote whale watching as an economic alternative to whaling, because we know it's, as we've seen in Iceland, it's a huge potential for an alternative industry, really. So we want to support a network of responsible whale watch operators.
And in terms of the idea of inspiring change from within, why do WDC focus on that approach as opposed to other options?
Yeah, I think it's a lot from, because we've been established for 30 years, more than 30 years now. We've seen successes in, like I mentioned, like what we've been working on in Iceland for the past 30 years. We've really seen that tangible change come from within by nurturing activists and by nurturing the whale watching companies that exist there, and sort of make sure that they're on the right track, and that they can grow in the most positive way. So I think, yeah, from that sense, we've learned that it's from within. It needs to come from within. But I think also why it's the right time for Norway is because like, as you mentioned, we've seen you know, only 2%, I think it's 2% of Norwegians eat whale meat often. So we know that it's really low in the market, and it's just not an everyday concern for the average Norwegian who you see along the street. They won't really know or talk about whaling much. So I think from that point of view, we knew that it was we know it's a good time to really approach this in Norway, and yeah, and make as much change as possible.
And through engaging the Norwegian public and different organizations and influential people, what impact have you seen from your efforts so far?
It's been, so I've been working on this for a year now, and it's been really inspiring. I think we've done more than we thought we'd be able to do. And that's just purely because of people in Norway's openness to collaborate, and they've been so open to and wanting to sort of make a change. It just has taken someone to come in and kind of facilitate it, I think, a bit more, because, you know, a lot of animal rights organizations, they have a lot of other things to focus on, and they can't only go on about whaling a lot. So we can come in as sort of a spokesperson for those organizations. And yeah, I think we've seen a lot of exciting things. We've been to Parliament in January, talking to the former Minister for the Environment, so that was really exciting. Just sort of a great inspiration that, you know, it's possible to actually talk to these politicians and see what problems we face within policy. And I think we've also seen, yeah, a lot of engagement from conferences and going to meet these people on the ground. And for example, the young activist group World Saving Hustle, who I'm sure I'll talk about in a bit as well, they've been so great in sort of wanting to work with us, and learning from our previous campaigns as well. So that's been a huge impact, and I think we can see that change that we've actually made already with them, just from having hosting a conference with them and teaching them about what campaigns they can run, and yeah, working alongside them.
And I will ask to find out more about your highlights of the year gone by in a minute, but as we are open and we like to kind of talk about everything that's going on, what do you think, from your understanding and your experience over the last 12 months, what are the big key challenges that WDC face in Norway to bring an end to whaling altogether?
Yeah, there definitely are challenges. It's not, you know, it's not a job that's going to be done within the next 2 weeks, unfortunately. So, and we do have to recognize these challenges, otherwise we won't learn and move. So, I think one of the biggest challenges is probably the strong opposition from a lot of politicians that we see, specifically also the fisheries minister, who is they change regularly, but they always have the same messaging, and it's kind of worrying that they almost are given this this speech to say, and they know that, you know, we're going to say whaling is sustainable and we need more seafood. So that's just the blatant message that they always give, and that's quite worrying that they don't listen to research and what's the new research that's coming in, I guess. So and with that, I think a lot of misinformation is spread, which is what partly Round's beautiful report has been really great in counteracting those myths that are often spread in Norway. Yeah, I'd say that those are the big challenges. Actually, one more thing I've just remembered. I guess one problem with the hunts in Norway, which are different to what we've seen in Iceland recently, is that in 2023 they obviously they got rid of the blue boxes, which were these monitors on the ships. So we no longer have any way of like seeing what's going on the vessels. So that's a problem that we have. But that gives us sort of something tangible to work towards. You know, we need to get some eyes on what's happening on the ships. Yeah.
And in terms of the successes, I will ask you that in a sec. But in terms of who we're very grateful for successes that Lottie's going to list coming up soon, we wouldn't be able to do the work we do without our amazing supporters, and a lot of the work. The great success that we had that Lottie's going to let us know about was through things like the Big Give that we had in the summer, and through Jingle Jam, who love what we do and support us and all our work, and for everyone else who gives through sponsorship or just a one-off donation. All the successes that Lottie's going to tell you about now are all because of your support. So ahead of that, thank you very much. But Lottie, so what tell us about all the good stuff that's happened in 2024. No, she frozen. Is Lottie there?
Oh, sorry. I think my
That's okay. You're
hello.
back.
Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
we can hear you loud and
I'm
clear.
back.
Yeah, it's the wonders
Great.
of webinars. But yeah, please go ahead and tell everyone about the highlights that
Yeah.
you've seen in 2024.
Yeah, so definitely need to say thank you, because all of the highlights that I'm going to tell you about have honestly only been possible because of the Big Give and Jingle Jam. So for me, I think the highlights that has come from this whole year has been the overwhelming feedback from Norwegian organizations and people who agree with what we're doing. And I think when we set out, I really didn't know what to expect from people in Norway. But I think the way that they've been so approachable and wanting to learn from us and work with us, and you know, share our materials and our messages, has been really, really great and inspiring. And I think that only kind of shows that what's possible, basically, because of this year that we've done now. It shows what's possible in the future if we can keep working there. So we were able to attend the biggest political gathering in Norway this year, which was huge. I mean, it's quite a big ordeal in Norway if you're from Norway, Arendalsuka, and I never really thought I'd be able to go there even. So being able to go there and talk to politicians about this issue was really, really amazing. So I think that was definitely a highlight, and would not have been possible without the organizations being so open and wanting to work together, and of course our very kind donations. So yeah, it's been some great things this year.
Now, one thing in particular that I really enjoyed this year, and I've actually got one of Round's posters on my wall from work that he did in Iceland. It kind of gives me inspiration every day. So it's the role, and I think there's such a huge moment for this in the way that we communicate stories, and that we try and get people to take our cause on as their own. And that is through the use of art within advocacy. So Raun, I've got some questions for you. I'm very curious about and eager to find out more. I guess for me, as someone who loves whales, dolphins, and porpoises, what first inspired you to give them a voice through your art?
Yeah. The first, yeah, it's a good question. I wonder like where to start, because it's the first whaling activism that I took part in was when I was 5 or 6 years old or so. And it was when I tell it because it's quite a funny story, because it was actually, do you remember Keiko, Free Willy from the film, The Killer Whale? Yeah? So he was originally caught around Iceland and was in the States. And I remember I was with a friend of mine, and we were reading the newspaper, making our own newspaper, and came across this story about Keiko being. This was after the Free Willy film was shot, right? And he was in the zoo in, I think it was in New Mexico or so. I don't have the story straight, but it caught our attention that he was there and he was not in a good state. He was sick. And this really touched us. And we decided to write a piece in the papers about it, and sort of asking, raising awareness that he should be brought back to Iceland. So this was kind of like the first time that I sort of had this motivation to do something. And I think, I mean, since then, I always, at that point, I was sort of interested in nature and animal welfare. And we wrote this thing that I remember. I had this vision that it would be like this long piece printed in the newspaper. And then I remember it came out and it was this tiny little 10 lines in some comment section. But the day after, we were called into the radio to talk about this and why we cared and why we thought something should be done for Keiko. And this was long before there was some years later, Keiko actually was brought back to Iceland, and that's another story. But I think this was it was something. I'm sure it made some difference to actually feel that we were heard. doing this. Then there was a long period of time where I didn't participate in any activism or activism really, but I have always been, it's like Lottie said, I was raised mostly in Iceland, but I'm half Norwegian, so I have strong connections there too. And so I mean, there is a lot of connection to nature, and this is always something that I've been interested in and cared about. But it took me a long time to go back to using my voice and finding a way to use my trade, which is illustration and graphic storytelling or storytelling in general to do something. Yeah.
And so, as I said, I first saw your work last summer. It was against the whaling that's going on in Iceland.
Yeah.
And one thing that happens with whaling around the world is that the people in charge of whaling and the people that want it to happen are quite happy to make up some science, make up some facts. Things like whales are eating all the fish, so we need to kill the whales because otherwise there'll be no fish left for the people. Just like that's a really simple one that if you ask people in Norway or Iceland or Japan, that's something that they actually think about quite seriously and say, well, yeah, of course we kill the whales because they eat all the fish. Whereas in real life, the more whales we have, the more fish we have because of the ecosystem and what great ecosystem engineers whales are. So I really like the way that you do things by bringing people's attention to how like silly these ideas are, but kind of like how do you approach the challenge of kind of countering the misinformation about whaling through your art?
Yeah, it's I think because these are topics, I mean, I did this report last year on whaling here in Iceland, which it started by me just kind of entering this group that was anti-whaling, that comes from my interest in the topic, but I didn't know so much about it. And I think that is the key going into making work like this is curiosity. And it is my natural way of figuring out things for myself. So I don't really set out to convince anyone of anything. Of course, I have maybe some idea of what I think about the matter, but I think that the best way to tell these stories is actually from the point of curiosity and figuring out what's actually going on. And as long as I sort of follow that hunch or intuition and curiosity for myself and find the answers that just follow it it's like just threading a visual path of sort of looking at the argumentation and the information that is out there and coming to a conclusion. And that sort of seems to work as it works for me to figure out things, and then luckily it seems to also help other people to learn something as well. And then I try to use humor and storytelling just to sort of entertain myself and then maybe get people on board. But it's mainly just a logistical way for me to understand a topic that I maybe don't know so much about.
And from our point of view, as soon as we saw the Iceland one, we thought, right, we need one for Norway as well next year. But I guess kind of from your point of view, I'm sure you kind of get lots of people coming to you and saying, oh, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Was there a reason that you wanted to kind of work with WDC on this project?
Yes, it's. I mean, it was from the beginning. I could feel like the rich amount of just professionalism and experience and information that WDC has and can provide. So I could really feel that there was. I mean, it's just so important for someone. I mean, like I say, it's something I cared about for a long time, and I myself had like a period of sort of climate crisis anxiety, and then to somehow find a way to use my art to do a tiny little bit, but that doesn't, you don't do that on your own. So to work with someone that can really help to I mean, that's so valuable for me as an artist to have that. So I'm very grateful to work with. I mean, it really doesn't happen. You don't do this kind of work on your own. It needs the backing of people that really know and can verify and just, yeah. So that's been really, really good and valuable. And I can very much feel that this is, yeah, of course, I get many requests. So I also want to choose to work with those where I can really feel that it's also where I can feel that my work will be used or like can reach people. And it also makes me very happy that this kind of work that I think maybe 10, 15 years ago would have been received as a little bit maybe even childish, or like people see this kind of drawing as something simple or something only fun, that there's something has happened where this kind of storytelling that like it's really getting some sort of acknowledgement as a proper way of delivering information. And that's also something I really appreciate, that we can sort of help each other to make a change.
So Lottie and I are from science backgrounds, so I can barely draw a stick man at the best of times. So where do you even start with this? Like, what's the creative process? Because there must be so many different, like, where do you start? Like, how does it all begin, and how do you kind of pull the bits that you think will be most impactful and put them into a piece of work like this?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a tricky question, because so much of this, I mean, what I want to say, it's some sort of like a intuition. It's again the curiosity, and I know that's not a really like fulfilling answer, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the drawing itself, that's just what feels. This is always a question of like, you can't be sort of too. I don't want to be too sensational, but then on the other side, there has to be space for emotion and feelings in there. But that's what yeah. So again, it's, I mean, overall, it's just finding a story. Like, what is actually interesting here? Why is it that why is the whale meat in every fridge in every supermarket in Norway, and still people are so unaware of it? That's an interesting question. So it's basically, for me, it's just lining up these questions and start sort of looking at, yeah, just what kind of sparkles, what creates, what makes me excited, what makes me want to know things. It's really just being a kid exploring a new topic.
And I imagine that there's a lot of research involved as well, because people in Norway who want to make some money from whaling, they might see this and look at the facts and the figures, and if they're not perfect, then they can turn around and say, well, that's not right, that's not right. So as well as the amazing artwork, that it also has to be backed up by facts that can't be argued against.
Yeah, there's a lot of balls to hold in the air while doing this. So it has to be visually interesting. There has to be a story that you can follow, I think, and the argumentation of the piece is built up with the storytelling. So that has to sort of work out, and then it's the facts, and that has to be absolutely waterproof, like you say. But that's where the collaboration with WDC and with you guys is so important, because that's why I say this kind of work, I can't do it by myself. I need that sort of team to exactly make that part, because yeah, like you say, like the whole thing could just collapse or be completely written off if there is one thing that is slightly off or could be misinterpreted. So that's really where it's the collaboration. it matters.
And I know that the piece of work was in Norway's biggest media outlet, biggest newspaper recently, which is amazing. But how do you, and I'm sure you've had some reactions from Norwegians, but how do you hope that people, say in Iceland when you brought out your piece, and in Norway when you brought out your piece, how do you hope that people will react? What do you want them to do after they've sat down and gone through your work?
What I really, I mean, what I want is to take people on this journey with me to explore the topic. So what I hope is that they come along on the whole story, and I kind of wish that people like read it. Of course, I want them to agree with me, but I think the most important thing is just to go through the story, and you can make up your own mind. When readers can make up their own mind, but that they have taken in the what is in there. And I don't so much like, and I think that's maybe important. I'm not there to convince anyone. I just want to have that conversation. And by that, I am also hoping that like going into it with that kind of no judgment, just curious. Yeah, like I know I've said curiosity a lot, but I really think that that's, I mean, a part of me also wants to entertain. I think there is so much of environmental activism that plays on feelings, and I myself, or like the difficult things, and I think there is a lot of space to be playful and have fun with it, as well as tackling really difficult topics. And what the comments that I appreciate the most on the Icelandic report and also on this one is giving space to changing your mind. So you don't read this because you know already what you don't like, that people that already don't have a preconceived idea or a very like stance on the topic can read it, and there is space to, you know, I heard from Icelandic people that worked with whaling that read the report and didn't feel offended, just felt invited to change their minds. And that's something I really appreciate, because I don't want to draw this and make anyone feel judged or ashamed or anything. It's more of a invitation to a conversation. That's what I hope.
And I think from my point of view, with the work that you do, and you're right in saying people who are actually in the industry, I can't. It's difficult to be offended when all you're doing is holding up a mirror and letting them see what they're doing and let them kind of think about things in a different way. And I think like the greatest kind of achievement you have with your art is to be able to get people to just sit and think and understand, this is crazy. I can't believe that this still happens, when you actually present all the facts there. And I think it's because of the imagery you use, I think it's really disarming. And as you mentioned, you want to entertain people, and a lot of people see kind of art like this. It might be funny or whatever, so they kind of sit, they have a look, and then suddenly it takes them by surprise. So it's really disarming. And so in terms of like Lottie, I'll just bring you in for a quick second. How does Round's report tie into the broader efforts in Norway, and what's the kind of feedback that you've had from your kind of partners and the people that you've met over there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, people have just said that it's beautiful, because it is. I have a little version of it always sitting next to me. Oh, you can't see it, on my desk, because I just love flicking through it. And I think, as Round said, it or just reminded me of there, it just aligns so much with what our messaging is, because it's not mean, it's not condemning, it's not trying to be sort of pointing fingers. It's just stating information in a funny and, yeah, I think like a new way that people won't have seen before. So I think in that way, it's been so great for us to sort of use and spread this positive information that, you know, about whales and why they're so important, but also shed some light on the facts that Norwegians maybe want to hide away from and don't really want to face the reality of. You know, the fact that a lot of it is toxic, and they want to, like, even Japan have said no to importing sometimes. They've said no to importing some meat from Norway. And I think, yeah, and it's all been shown in the responses from both the public, as you mentioned. It was in Aftenposten, the biggest newspaper in Norway. And from the comments there, I mean, Round has probably received some messages maybe from that as well. But from the comments, you know, there are those people who are obviously pro whaling, and that's sort of something we anticipated. But it's also just like a way of facilitating discussion. And I will say, obviously, also a lot of mostly positive feedback in the comment section, being like, you know, this is appalling, what are we doing? I think one person even said, you know, I'm ashamed to be Norwegian because we do this. But it is also like, you can see it creates discussion, and it's just exactly that which we wanted to do with it, because there isn't enough discussion about whaling in Norway, and that's what we need to sort of create this change, because it will only come from people in Norway having these realizations and questioning what's actually going on. So yeah, and I will say also, from like the organizations that we've worked with, it's been really positive. And they have a really big, actually two of the biggest animal welfare organizations have also wanted to sort of print it in their supporter magazines, and so it's just been fantastic. And I honestly, yeah, I couldn't be more pleased with how it's been received in Norway. Yeah.
And I guess I will be eagerly waiting for what's next. But Round, what's next for you? Because I know that you do kind of blog posts for different newspapers. That I see artwork popping up everywhere, and it's what I love is that it's very. I know it's you, and I really like that. I don't like some of our watchers in the UK who used to read Roald Dahl books, like Quentin Blake, the artist on Roald Dahl books. Some of my favorite books ever. Still, I went to the museum not so long ago, but like, you can always tell that it's his, and that's what I love about your stuff. So I'll always recognize it when it pops up. But what's next for Round? What have you got lined up?
Yeah, thank you. I also love Quentin Blake. It's one of the main my main inspirations. So I work in sort of, I have always many different projects going. So I work a lot with I write books and illustrate books, and then it's I have my newsletter, and it's all, and then some reports as well. So it's all ties into sort of storytelling and some philosophy of nature in some way or another. So I'm having a new book out now, and then I am also involved. I mean, the whaling activism here is going to be ongoing, and also there is in terms of environmental activism, there is a big battle here now with open salmon farming. So that's something that I made a report couple of months ago about that here, and that's something that probably still have to work on. And yeah, so some different visual reports in the pipelines, shall we say.
Well, I look forward to seeing them. Now, it's time for me to be quiet, and for the people that are watching, it's a chance for you to ask Raoul or Lottie any questions that you have. In terms of submitting them, I think there's a Q&A button, or to submit them in the chat, and we will have a look. Okay, so Lottie, what's next in the Wave of Change campaign?
Well, even though, yeah, the whaling season has just ended this year, work never stops. So we need to keep going with this momentum that we've got from this past year. And I guess as we've seen these kind of successes from working with people in Norway, we're going to just keep, you know, really, really building that out, that networking, making it as collaborative as possible with everyone who's involved, and building it, extending out further. You know, we're always looking for new people to work with in Norway, and that's includes politicians. We know next year there's the elections are coming up, so we want to push for what's the word? Push for sort of the parties to sort of sign up to some gosh, I've completely forgotten the word. But yeah, we need to basically work with politicians to show how they can support whales and dolphins more in Norway. And I think we're going to hope to do some more testing on some whale meat, potentially dog food, because some whale meat dog food, we know that they sell whale meat in dog food. So looking at that, and then also a big part of what we're gonna do this next year is looking into the monitoring of the hunts and investigating that, really. So there's a lot to do, but it's going to be an exciting year again, I think.
I've got another question here. Raoul, how do we start if we want to try and tell stories through art? I guess it's where did you begin? Was it kind of lots of, I know you said that you were inspired by Free Willy, but when did you start kind of drawing things and trying to tell stories through art? And how can people where do people start, I guess?
I mean, I have the cliche answer of like, I never stopped, because that's, you know, what kids do. And you train as a kid, you're sort of like given this license to draw, and then at some point you stop, and then people, you know, 20 years later say like you, I can't even draw a stick figure. I believe everyone can. And what I also am very enthusiastic about is that we don't have to draw like that. Using visual language, it doesn't have to be beautiful drawings, but that you can get a lot across with just using very simple visual tools. And you can sort of do like a quick sketching just by searching online, on like finding just quick helpful tools of how to start using simple visuals to make up stories. But I think really how do you start, like 101? I think really it starts with just having that sketchbook and the pen, and start investigating, just start writing, and I think a lot about it, because we have like, there's this theory of that we have these two hemispheres, and there are different things that they are good at, and we are so used to using our right one, which is like where we do maths and where we think linearly with letters and words, and the left one, which is where we do spatial and visual things and patterns. This is the one that we train so little, and that's where drawing happens. So what people do is that when you start drawing and you're not in practice, just like an athlete that hasn't been, you know, running for 10 years, of course, it's going to be hard to begin with. So breaking that barrier and just start using that left hemisphere to like draw something, and not stop when you say, you know, this is ugly, or it doesn't look like, you know, Rounds, who has been doing it continuously every single day for the past 15 years. You know, if you get through that barrier, I think you're onto something.
Okay, we've got some questions flooding in now at great speed in the Q&A section. If anyone wants to ask a question, please press the button. So I'll go through these one by one. So what inspired WDC to focus on ending whaling in Norway specifically? Lottie, I'll give you that one.
Great question. I think as I touched on before, it's sort of we've been working in Iceland for a long time, and we have been working in Norway as well for, you know, since we started it. But I think it's the time is right for Norway now, because we've seen that you know, there've been a lot of positive changes in the country. I think we can see that there are fewer and fewer vessels going out, and they're catching less whales every year, even though the quotas are going up and down a bit. And we know that you know, demand for the whale meat is really not popular. So I think that's given us the incentive to really focus on Norway now, because it's seems more tangible to create change when we know that there are a lot of people in Norway who oppose it, and a lot of people who are also indifferent about it, which means that we could change their minds. Yeah.
Thank you, Lottie. And this, I think you can both have a stab at this one. I think it's so. What do you think is the most effective way to change public perception about whaling in Norway? I'll go to Round for that one. So what's the most effective way you think? Obviously, there's the artwork that you're doing, but having spent time in Iceland and Norway, what's the best way to connect with people on the ground?
I'm tempted to link it to the next question, which is also about involving more artists, because I really think that this has to happen on, there is no one solution that is going to get through, or one message. I think it has to probably happen on because we are we all have different ways of receiving information. So I really think that I think that's a very exciting question about the Norwegian, a dream team of Norwegian artists. I don't know if and that's something I've seen here, where I obviously believe in the power of art, and that to see here in Iceland, there has been lots of different musicians and visual artists and scientists sort of joining together, theater people, choreographers joining, and each in their way delivering the message anti-whaling. And then I think that's a very powerful way to reach people.
And Lottie, what do you think in terms of the most effective way to change public perception about whaling in Norway?
I think, yeah, I agree with what Round said. And I think, like we said before, just approaching people with an open mind and with no judgments or you know, sort of preconceptions about what they might think, because I think it is really important to understand why people think a certain way before you try to change their mind about something. So yeah, I think doing more things like polling and surveying, understanding why people are supporting whaling still, even though we know a lot of the sort of myths that they still say, but there might be other reasons that people are really holding on to it. So I think understanding perceptions is really important, and opening more sort of more ways of discussing it, because I think it's as I said before many times, it's not a topic that's discussed a lot in Norway. So I think opening more ways for it to be challenged would be the best way to sort of change people's minds about it.
And sorry to bounce one straight back to you, Lottie. But what role does international cooperation play in WDC's campaign against whaling?
I mean, it's in a lot of what we do. And I think this work in Norway is also related to international work that we do. For example, my colleague Ed Goodall and my colleagues Katie and Ed working on international intergovernmental sort of policy. They use a lot of what we investigate in Norway in their campaigns or in their sort of policy work internationally. So at the International Whaling Commission, for example, in Peru recently, they used footage that we had from an organisation we work with in the UK, for example, who had gone out and filmed a whale hunt last season in Norway, and it showed that the whale had taken 21 minutes to die. So it's through collaborating through all sort of alleys to make international differences as well. I don't know if that answered the question properly.
I think it did. Georgia, Raoul, would you like to do a piece of work on Japan too?
I would love to do a piece of work on Japan too. And I think what is very interesting there is I would love to do it. I think it's also so interesting as well to think about. I mean, they are playing up, it seems, the role of native indigenous people of Japan and their past in whale hunting, and I think there are very interesting stories to tell there about how that is used to explain. It would be very I'm overall very interested in this topic. So
perfect. And I think I will bring the question and answers to a close by asking one of my own. So just to put you on the spot for each of you, what are your favorite whales and why? Just to put it out there. I'll give you a second to think. Obviously this has we're not throwing shade on any other whales apart from these, but just a curiosity.
I can go first. I think I have mine. I mean, it's impossible to say, but I at the moment, fin whales are really caught my. There's something about the way they look. And first of all, I mean, whales look ridiculous. To draw whales, it's ridiculous because their shape is just so weird. But fin whales in particular, they're have such a funny shape, and they're like the greyhounds of the sea. And there's so many mysterious things about how they live and what they do down there. I think they get my vote today.
That's a very good answer. Lottie?
Yeah, I think mine changes every day in this job, but I'd have to say the humpback whale, I think, because I think it's so great that it loves singing and it talks by singing. And they just look so great when they jump out of the water. So I'd have to say humpback.
Very good answer from both of you. And also in terms of the singing, please keep an eye out on WDC News for updates, because we do love to host sound baths from time to time in wonderful locations where you can actually sit and be surrounded by the sounds of whales from around the world. It's quite an incredible experience. So we did one at our supporter event in the summer gone by. So yeah, and I just to round it off, for me, it's a pilot whale. I love pilot whales. My first ever time swimming with a whale was when I was in the water, and a pilot whale kind of came over to me and said hi. So that's it for me. So Lottie and Raoul, thank you ever so much. I've really enjoyed this. Even though I've spoken to you both before, I found this kind of really encouraging and enlightening, and to be able to find out more about about what's going on. So thank you very much for all of your insights. And for your commitment to the cause. One thing to bear in mind is that we are never going to give up until this ends. So as we said before, we want every whale, dolphin and porpoise to be safe and free. And we have decided that our way of doing it is the right way, and that's to work with people in country that want to see change themselves, support them and provide them with the tools that they need to be able to bring whaling to an end. So whether that's in Norway, Iceland, Japan, the Faroe Islands, we're working with communities all around the world to bring this to an end. We will be sending out the details of where you can get this illustrated report, and also all of Raun's details, so you can go and follow her newsletter. It's very good. So when it gets in your comes in your inbox, it's great. And finally, I would like to say thank you ever so much for everyone tuning in and listening to this conversation. We couldn't do anything without our supporters, and even if one person had turned up today, that would be encouraging, because we knew that there was one person there who's with us in our mission to keep the whales safe and free. Again, thank you so much for all that contributed at the Big Give in the summer, and thanks once more to Jingle Jam for all your ongoing efforts and for helping us try and make change around the world. Thanks everyone, and take care, and we will speak to you soon.